So Zekus has been working hard on updates for Lethal Company, and no one but him knows for sure what is cooking up in that head of his. But there's a few things we can guess might be coming up based on information that's included in the game's files and a few other sources. This is all speculation, by the way, so please don't take any predictions made in this video as guaranteed fact. The Lasso Man. Within the game files for Lethal Company is an unused model for an enemy called the Lasso Man. This entity has the appearance of a humanoid figure made out of red ropes looped into a noose shape in several places. The Lasso Man is partially implemented already, and can even spawn on challenge moons, but his AI is broken, unless you have a mod that makes him functional, though these mods just give him the thumper's behavior. It seems that the intended behavior of the Lasso Man is to approach players and grab them from behind before dragging them away, similar to the Bracken, as the Lasso Man has an animation for dragging the player. Unlike the Bracken, the Lasso Man wouldn't kill the player instantly, instead doing damage gradually over time while dragging them deeper into the facility. Players killed by the Lasso Man would have their cause of death shown as strangled when scanned. The Lasso Man cannot be killed by players and can only be stunned with flashbangs or the stun gun, though it has a high vulnerability to being stunned. It's possible that the Lasso Man was intended to be encountered on the hard difficulty moons and serve a similar role as the Ghost Girl and Jack in the Box, as a constant threat that needs to be managed since there is no way to permanently disable it other than locking it behind a secure door. It's also likely intended as a way to incentivize players to purchase the stun gun, since this and stun grenades would be the only ways to free a grabbed player other than having someone on the ship teleport them away, though it's possible that a finished version of the entity may also allow players with shovels to free their teammate. The Lasso Man has a power level of 2, similar to the Ghost Girl, though it's possible for 2 Lasso Men to spawn in the facility at once. They can open doors relatively quickly, making closed doors not an effective way of slowing them down. There is a terminal entry for the Lasso Man, and, though it is unfinished, it gives the Lasso Man a danger level of 30%, the same as the Snare Flea, implying it was meant to be slow and relatively easy for players to avoid if they're being careful. I give the Lasso Man a very high probability of being fully implemented into the game in a future update, as it is partially finished already, and would fill an interesting gameplay niche separate from the rest of the game's current entities. More company monsters. Within the company building is a tentacle monster that collects your scrap items and sometimes eats you if you piss it off, but there are actually assets for 3 company monsters. The tentacle monster is the only one implemented right now, but there are also unused files for a giant hand and a long tongue. It's unknown how the different monsters were planned to be implemented, but the game currently has 3 different behaviors for the company monster, and it's possible that in the future each of these could correspond to a different kind of company monster, giving players a visual representation of the company monster's current behavior. The 3 states of the company monster change how quick it is to anger, how long it takes to collect and process scrap, and how many players it can kill in a single visit. The tongue also has a faster attack animation than the other monsters, meaning players could have less time to get out of the way if it decides to attack. Of course, it's also possible that if the other 2 monsters were implemented, then brand new behavior states could be created for them. I think the additional company monsters may be implemented in the future as they would not need much work to implement and would add a bit more depth to the company building, though Zekus may decide not to use them if having multiple company monsters conflicts with his current plans for the game's lore and he's decided to focus the story on a single monster antagonist instead. Binoculars. One item that hasn't been implemented in the game yet is the binoculars. Presumably, these would allow you to zoom in to get a better look at things from far away. I don't see them being useful enough to be a store-bought item as they would be useless indoors and on the hard difficulty moons. If they had the ability to see through the fog on Vow and March, or if they had the ability to scan enemies from afar, then they could make it easier to find forest giants from a safe distance, but this is still too much of an edge use to justify spending money on them, and the forest giants are already pretty obvious. I could see the binoculars being introduced as a scrap item with utility, like the laser pointer or air horn, as Zekus prefers to include mildly useful items as scrap rather than buyables. I give the binoculars a mid-tier chance of being included, as they're mostly useless but would make an interesting scrap item. The Mapper. The Mapper is a portable map screen that you would be able to carry with you. It functions exactly the same as the screen on the ship, allowing you to see enemies, scrap items and doors and traps in your area. The Mapper was actually implemented in early test versions of the game before the ship screens were added. It was removed in order to have the ship's screen serve the same role instead, giving you a reason to have one player stay behind on the ship as they can assist you in ways that they couldn't inside the facility. If the mapper was ever brought back into the game, it would need to be a heavily nerfed version of it to keep it from being overpowered, perhaps by making it a very expensive late-game item that only shows you the layout of the facility and not monsters or loot. I give the mapper the lowest chance of being brought back in an update, as it's merely a holdover from a previous version of the game and is unlikely to fit with the game's current direction. The box. All I was able to find about the box is this entry in the store menu. Presumably the box would be a two-handed item that you could place 2 or 3 smaller items into, allowing you to carry around more items than the inventory limit would normally allow. The box would make it possible to collect more scrap items than you would normally be able to in a single trip, or bring more utility items into the building than you would normally be able to, such as several flashbangs or some extra flashlights, at the cost of not being able to carry a two-handed item back with you. This is already a common fan request, and there are mods that add similar items or expand the player's inventory in other ways. I don't think we'll be getting the box in the near future though, as Zeekus clearly wants managing the 4-item limit to be a major part of the gameplay, though later on when there's more content the box may be added as a late-game item that could become essential to meet the higher quotas. I give the box a mid-tier chance of being added to the game. It probably won't be in the next update, but there's a good chance we'll see it eventually. The elevator. This one is kind of getting into WMG territory, but in an early trailer for the game you can see the players use an elevator that has a slot for the apparatus to plug into. You see, in Zeekus' original concept for the game, it was meant to take place entirely at the experimentation facility, with the players going down an elevator to explore multiple floors of the same building. Of course, this was just an artifact of a very different type of game than what Lethal Company ended up becoming, but it would be interesting if Zeekus found a way to implement the elevator in the current version of the game, perhaps as either a new interior type or part of the existing factory interior. If it was implemented into the factory, it could require players to power it with the apparatus, making some parts of the facility inaccessible until after the apparatus is pulled and things become more dangerous. It could also give players a reason to bring a previously recovered apparatus into the facility with them and risk losing it, in exchange for being able to use the elevator more safely. Because the drill under the company building has 2 slots to plug apparatus into, it's clear that Zeekus is already interested in giving the apparatus more uses other than being sold for scrap. The elevator has a low chance of being brought back to the game, but I do think that we could see something inspired by it make an appearance in some other form, making the apparatus a more significant part of gameplay. Before you go, I'd like to remind you that this video is just speculation. Cut content is cut for a reason, and it's just as likely that none of what I've shown you will be added to the game in the future. Most of this stuff will probably stay on the cutting room floor, and I only made this video for entertainment purposes. I do hope the Lasso Man gets added to the game though, because he's really cool.